had a glass of water from 1997. So that happened to be sitting here. Not here, but backstage, so you can't waste this. I happen to know something about the bust of Brahms. Oh, by the way, hello. It's good to see you all. I'm still Bruce Adolphe, and this is the second part of our Inside Chamber Music, and we will be listening to and discussing Brahms and Schumann. And it so happens that the Clarinet Trio you're about to hear was first rehearsed, not performed, rehearsed in a home, a country estate owned by Anna Wittgenstein. He knew the whole Wittgenstein family very well. And she also arranged for the commissioning of the bust, which was much bigger and more impressive than that, but it's the same idea. Brahms is often discussed in terms of, was he old-fashioned or was he modern? Was he reactionary or progressive? This can start to become wearying, but I'll address it just a little bit. The reason I want to talk about it, not only because it's discussed so much, but because he was a little bit out of time. And that actually fits into my vision of why his music is often rhythmically so complex. He was out of time in the sense that harmonically, he wrote very differently from everyone around him. You have to put him in context. There was Wagner, and even when Brahms was older, and when he wrote this, there was Mahler, there was even Debussy composing, Richard Strauss. So, those are the younger composers of the older Brahms, but still, they were composing, and his style was harmonically very different. I'm going to give some examples of that in a moment. And he also was a little bit rhythmically innovative, and it turns out a lot rhythmically innovative, which makes him kind of a modernist. And according to Schoenberg, who wrote this famous article, Brahms the Progressive, his whole way of composing pointed more forward, gave more to chew on for composers like Schoenberg and Mahler than Wagner actually did. So it's an interesting phenomenon, that balance. But he was also out of sync with himself emotionally. He was a difficult guy. He had bad relationships with most women. There were a few he liked well, and there were a lot of people he irritated, not just women, most people. In fact, there are lots of famous quotes of Brahms that give you an inkling of his personality. I'll recite 30 or 40 of them for you now. For example, these are all actual quotes of Brahms. If there's anyone in the room I have not insulted, please forgive me. Another one is, if someone you meet says he is a friend of mine, he's probably mistaken. When the famous composer, Brahms, was shown a manuscript by a young composer, he said, "Where did you get such good manuscript paper?" And that's all. When he was playing one of his cello sonata with a young cellist who turned to him and said, "I'm sorry, maestro, when you play the piano, I cannot hear myself." And he said, "Lucky you." And then another one, let's see. When a musician from the orchestra of Bayreuth, Wagner's orchestra, died, Brahms said, "The first course." You have to think about that. It's awful. And then there was the out-of-sync relationship with the two most important people in his life, Clara Schumann and Robert Schumann. Robert Schumann was his mentor, discovered him, pronounced him to the world, and inspired him, and was in every way his musical guide at the beginning. And Clara Schumann was 14 years older than Brahms, and Brahms' mother was 14 years older than Brahms' father, which I leave that to Freud, who was alive at the time. It's interesting to think of Freud being, I have a note about that, let's see. Yes, Freud, 1856 to 1939. Brahms, 1833, to 1897. Died when he was still 63, Brahms. Anyway, so he was out of sync with those two people as well because of his relationships. You can easily get the wrong idea about that in great depth with the movie starring Katharine Hepburn called Song of Love, in which she plays Clara Schumann. And everything in the movie is wrong, but it's very good. Actually, it's not even good. So I wouldn't have watched that. Now, there's the whole issue of tradition and modernism, of his relationships to people and rhythm. And I mention that because Brahms's rhythm is probably the most unique aspect of his music, and it is what has fed a lot of composers after him. Let me give you one example. I'm sorry, you're going to have to go stand somewhere for a while. Thank you. Here, you can study this. Thank you. This is a little bit of a piano piece by Brahms, but before I play it for you, this is the outside of the left hand and the right hand without the melody. So it's obviously 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But when you put the melody in, you get this. Right? Now, that's about the simplest example I could find of what I'm talking about, which is the layering here of a rhythm that is off. Now, it's often called ambiguous, but I don't think that's really the word. The word is ambivalent, which some people have used also for this, and I like that better because Brahms's relationship to people was kind of ambivalent, even to his career. He sought after fame, but when he got it, he resigned from the positions he got. He was very insecure about a lot of things. And this business of pitting meter against rhythm is what you're hearing. Now, meter means the time signature, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the meter. And the rhythm, bom, 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 bom. The phrasing, the rhythm is over the meter. So the rhythm is the melodic writing that is separated, detached very often from the meter. And he does this to an extraordinary degree, and we'll hear a lot of it in this piece. In fact, it's almost cubist, because if you think of a Picasso picture, the way the multiple views of a face are seen on a flat plane comes from the idea of the planes, the geometric planes separating. Usually this is talked about in terms of Stravinsky, and it makes perfect sense. They were contemporaries, and Stravinsky and Picasso did the same thing, one in rhythm and one in space on a canvas. But Brahms did it first. And he wasn't the first person to displace rhythm. I mean, you find it in Beethoven's scherzos. You find it in Tchaikovsky. You even find it in Mozart in very specific places, like the oboe quartet has a crazy rhythmic section, and Don Giovanni has some strange things going on, but they're very rare. And you find it a little bit in Chopin, but in Brahms, it becomes the method of composing is to separate rhythmic planes from the meter and have them floating and creating quite extraordinary things. Now, let's hear the opening of this piece, finally. But before we do, are you still warmed up? Okay. Before we do, it's the famous story, which I'll tell briefly because you have it on your phone, is that Brahms he said he was retired, he wasn't going to compose anymore, he was so old, he was younger than I am now when he said it, actually. He was 57 when he said he was not going to write anything anymore because he's washed up. He also said, by the way, to one of Clara Schumann's grandchildren, and I've got the letter somewhere in front of me. Oh, here it is. Yesterday, Brahms said to grandmother, that's Clara Schumann, that he no longer composed for the public, but only for himself. One composes only until one's 50th year. The creative power begins to diminish after that. Of course, after that, he wrote, what did he write after his 50th year? The Third Symphony, the Fourth Symphony, the G major quintet, the clarinet quintet, the clarinet trio, the clarinet sonatas, all of the great piano pieces, Opus 116, Opus 117, Opus 118, Opus 119, lots of, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a lot of his best music. So he was wrong, but who knows why he said it? Maybe, like all the other things I said earlier, he said it just to make people irritated, like he just did me when I read it. Okay. All right, so let's hear the opening of this piece, which, by the way, he heard Mühlfeld, the clarinetist, play, and decided that Mühlfeld was such a great clarinetist that he had to write something for him, and Mühlfeld convinced him to go further, and he ended up writing 2 sonatas, this trio, and the quintet. Now, here we go, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, there's no place to stop, so I have to interrupt. Now, excuse me again. There are a couple of things I want to say about this before we really roll with this piece. I said that Brahms's harmonies were, for his time, conservative. It's a simplistic statement because sometimes they're extremely complex, but they're still generally conservative. Now, what you heard there was all A minor until we get this, and I'll get back to that in just a moment, but it's very folksy, and if it were a folk song, here's the folk song it would have been. It needs an ending. It never has that. It doesn't have an ending. And that's important because Schubert, for example, who Brahms loved, would write a full-blooded tune with an ending and round it off and then go on and explore it. Brahms, more like Beethoven, being more classical, leaves everything open-ended. So you don't get the end of that tune like what I just played. Let me give you an example of a very extreme version of the harmony that was more typical of some of the composers around him, especially kind of a Wagnerian sound, with the same tune. Okay, that's so different than what you hear because Brahms is full of restraint. Then, what's interesting though is that the first accidental, the first chromatic note, the first thing that refers to another key other than A minor is this, the C sharp and the clarinet. This is very Brahms because it's in the wrong key. Now, what I mean by that is it is completely standard grammar and syntax in that period and before in classical music in general. The opening theme should have a cadence on the dominant, which is, it should go there. He eventually gets there, but he goes down instead and goes here. That means he's in this key. We often talk about how Brahms has a darkness and a melancholy and it's autumnal, and there's a reason. It's not just a mood thing. It comes out of the technique. Where a lot of composers go up into the dominant, Brahms often, before he does that, dips down into the subdominant. Now, subdominant simply means below, 5 notes below. So if you're in A minor, the dominant is E, 5, A, B, C, D, E. The subdominant is D, A, G, F, E, D. Right, I'm just making sure it's... up, get up. Okay, so we'll be back to you in just a moment. So basically, now that you've heard the opening theme, I'm going to make the opening theme more classical and relate it to Schubert, so you can see what I mean. This is not what he did. This is what he would have done if it were much more classical. First, here's a little phrase from a Schubert sonata. This is actually by Schubert. I just want to say one thing. Notice that, like the Brahms, and it has the same ideas. That's why I picked this. But it goes to the dominant. Now, if Brahms were to do that with his theme, mixing up his ideas, but using a classical structure, it would be like this. See, that is classical. In other words, the theme is a question and answer. It has a melodic arc answered by a kind of questioning, sometimes called a feminine arc, and then an answering, a little more masculine sounding. This is the way it was talked about at that time. Response, and then the same thing again, and it's balanced, and it goes to the dominant. That's what he would have done, but it's completely different because it's stretched out and it moves into the subdominant. Now, I'm not going to go on about dominant and subdominant, but it's an important concept because it happens throughout this piece, and most of Brahms's late pieces go down, and the harmonies move down and down instead of up and up. So now let's hear that again, the real thing, and we'll move on from there. I'm looking at you. Do you always play in that posture? Because that's very Brahms. Did you see this? I just noticed that you were leaning back with your arms fully extended. Is that the way you normally play? Because it's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just there's lots of pictures of Brahms where he tilts back and plays like this. And it's described. There are a lot of drawings of it. And that was great. Maybe it's coming from the music or something. Perfect. But you have to get up anyway. So what you just heard there were many, many rhythmic displacements. And a rhythmic displacement, again, means that the meter continues, but that the phrases are off-center. So, for example, even when you hear this, you might be hearing it like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's 4, 1, da-dum. You see, but you don't want to play it too obviously like. You could do that, some people do, or you could play it, which is too much the other way. What you're doing is excellent, which is that you feel the ambivalence, which is hard to tell. It's just floating there, and it's quite complex, but not as, it gets more and more so. Then you have this. This, you have the rhythm, the beat, divan, di, dam, di, dam. That's a triplet over 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, it's 1, but it's divided into sixes. 1, 2, 3. And then you start to hear more and more of threes against twos, which is a very simple rhythm. And Brahms loves 3 against 2. You can practice it if you want. It's like this. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1. It's not hard. And then you switch. 2 and 3. If you can, this prolongs your life by 3 years. If you do it every day. That and exercise and good diet. Now, but why does he do 3 against 2? I'm not going to say something as ridiculous as because of the triangle with Clara Schumann and Robert Schumann and Brahms is 3 against 2. No. Because I think he was doing it before he met them, but maybe not. I'm not sure about that. Now, then you start to hear, you're getting good at jumping up like that. Then you start to hear this tune. Yeah. I'm going to have to go and, let's see. Can you guys play this before I get up, Bo? It's just, this again is 4-1, 4-1, 4-1, and then this whole thing, the accents are in the wrong place. He has to write sforzandi. So you're feeling as if it's 1-2, 1-2, but it's 4-1-2-3, 4-1-2. And the reason for doing that is, again, it disrupts the meter, and the tension between the phrase and the meter is a very big part of the drama. That's how Brahms builds drama, more than any other composer in this world. It's done with rhythm. In fact, rhythm in Wagner is not actually innovative in the slightest, except for how long the harmonic rhythm is. Like, he'll hold a chord for a very, very long time before resolving it or not resolving it. His sense of pacing was new, but it was also related to storytelling. So in some ways, it's not so pure. Where Brahms rhythmically was a great innovator. And usually, if a composer is innovating rhythmically, there might be a little less harmonic innovation, because you can't do both at the same time, usually. It's true of quite a few people, including Schoenberg. Schoenberg, who followed and practically worshipped Brahms and wrote a lot about it. Schoenberg was an innovator in the harmonic world and in the melodic world by writing his 12-tone music and completely separating, or I shouldn't say separating, but extending the chromatic world to its saturation point so that you couldn't find the harmonic basis anymore, and key disappeared. But rhythmically, his music was the same as music from a century earlier. He didn't do any rhythmic innovation. It's kind of strange. Okay, so Brahms was the opposite of Schoenberg in that respect, which is and Schoenberg, of all the things he wrote about, he never noticed this because it's too close. He never thought of himself as conservative in any way, but rhythmically, Schoenberg's music could be Viennese waltzes half the time. Okay, so, no, stay there. So if you could play that section that I was just playing from whatever bar that is, 30.
Pick up to 34.
Yeah. Now, before you play this, which is going to be great, there have been some musicians who have rebarred and rephrased Brahms to make it look on the page exactly as it sounds. Believe it or not, one of them was Schnabel, who was a great pianist who had a direct connection to that whole world, very close to that whole world. He didn't say that it should be renotated, but when something was going 4, 1, 2, 3, or when the accents were all in strange places, he would rebar it to show how he phrased it. This reached its pinnacle with Leonard Bernstein rebarring the Rite of Spring. Now, the Rite of Spring of Stravinsky, I think it's very interesting to talk about Brahms and Stravinsky together because of this rhythmic issue. The Rite of Spring is very hard to conduct because it's constantly changing meters. And in some places, it's very rapid and difficult. And if you mess that up, you can mess up the orchestra if they look up, which they sometimes do. And it causes, that. But so Bernstein decided that in order to get the rhythm the way he wanted it, he actually rebarred the Rite of Spring, which was objected to by many people, including almost the entire New York Philharmonic. But nobody objected to it more than Milan Kundera, the author, the novelist, who wrote a whole book about people tampering with with original work in any kind of interpretive way. And in fact, he also disliked very much the idea of discussing whether somebody's music. You were wondering why Milan Kundera wrote so much about music. His father was a famous musicologist, and he wrote a lot about music. Milan Kundera was very upset with the idea of talking about music as progressive or conservative, as if it were politics. In fact, here's a quote from Kundera, where you'll see how much he dislikes that. Given that an era's political tendencies are always reducible to just two opposing tendencies, a work of art necessarily ends up being classified as either progressive or reactionary. And since reaction is evil, the Inquisition can start the trial proceedings. I have always deeply, violently detested those who look for a position, political, philosophical, religious, whatever, in a work of art, rather than searching in it for an effort to know, to understand, and grasp this or that aspect of reality. That's pretty powerful. I like it, actually. But I still have to refer to these issues because they're all over the place. But that puts it in perspective, because is Brahms a reactionary? Is Brahms a progressive? The answer is that those are points of view, and Brahms was Brahms, and it's very personal. And what he did was really sum up much of the classical era, and with his personal language, which is primarily rhythmical, although it's not often perceived that way, and that he reinterpreted a lot of harmonies so that instead of having this hierarchy built above, he built it below and above much more, so that he tipped it the other way, and he also did that with his orchestration, so that it is deep, but profound, but I mean literally, under, sub. Okay. Okay, now we get to the second big theme, but before we play it the normal way, I'm going to try to make up, where is it? I'll make up a little accompaniment for it. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Okay, do it again, I'll do it better. But what I'm doing is just trying to confuse you about the rhythm, because I'm doing something ordinary. That's the idea. Go ahead. Now, it still wasn't that good, but anyway, what Brahms actually does is full of silences and fragments, and the piano is in a different time zone. Let's hear that. This is what he actually wrote. Isn't that amazing? See, the reason I was messing around with it is so that you would have in your ears something that is ordinary. It's so easy to take his melodies and have simple accompaniments like that. He easily could have done that. And what makes Brahms so Brahms, which of course he couldn't help, but is that this displacement of every aspect of the piano from the cello. Every spot that you want to hear the bass note in the piano, it's missing. Every time there's a weak beat, the piano enters. And the piano's phrases have the same shape as the cello's phrases, but they're moved over a little bit. And because of that, it is somewhat cubist. That's what I mean, like the planes have separated. Let's hear that one more time, because it's a great example. Yeah, great. It's a wonderful example. Now, since we are going to hear the whole movement soon, let's go to the next big theme, which is at bar 67. Now, of course, it's hard to start there because the clarinet and the cello are syncopated and they're off, so we have to start somewhere. How about we start at 58, 59, 60, 61. At least you come in at the same time. It's actually, if you look through Brahms's music, finding a spot where somebody isn't in the middle of something when someone's starting something is not so easy. But there's a spot. Now, that theme has another obsession of Brahms. You know, in Brahms's lifetime, he was criticized a lot, and he was often criticized for what basically are his main characteristics, which is what is typical, the most obvious things. And he did do the 2 against 3 thing a lot that I mentioned, and he also had a certain kind of melodic writing, and because it was recognizable, that was easy for someone to attack that. This is a really good example of his falling thirds, the thirds, thirds, thirds. Now what that means, pardon me, let's see, here. This tune, first the thirds are rising, and then from here, if I put these in, instead of the octaves that they're in, if I do this, it's just thirds falling. You see, dee, da, 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 dee, da. And then this falling third is all over his music. In fact, I luckily have 2 of them to play for you, 2 really good examples. A song, O Tod, O Death, sorry, which the tune is this. And that is your falling thirds. O Tod, O Tod. I don't know why I have to play it for you, I sing so well anyway. But here it is, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, just a little bit of it. Whoa. Got to start at the beginning. Here we go. Now, I only played that because it's exactly the same notes in the same key, and so is this. Yeah, the Fourth Symphony, which was written around the same time. In fact, so was that song and the symphony and this. They were all written when he was way past his prime. He was over 50. He could hardly write anything anymore. So that's an obsession of the falling thirds. Yeah, there are quite a few other falling thirds, which I could play for you, but I think I'll move on. Now, here's another example of a displacement, a rhythmic displacement that is quite extraordinary. We're going to start right where we stopped. So at that phrase, maybe we should start at 77 on that chord there and keep going into the next theme. Great. Now, you may have heard it right away, but when the cello plays its tune, we should get 2 pianos so you don't have to get up all the time. Just maybe another one right over here. Where are we? Ah, yes, the cello. It's a good thing he didn't write that because it doesn't exist on the cello, but that's okay. He had that worked out harmonically. You could have quickly tuned it down, like in the Schumann we're doing later. But the accompaniment has in it, in the piano, the tune is here. Now, can you play this? You play a little softer, just for now, and you play a little more, and let's listen to how the piano is imitating it, but not in a beat that you expect, not in a rhythmic relationship that is normal. It is really displaced. It's definitely off-center. Isn't that wild? You can't figure out what to do with that. Do that one more time, because it's really worth a lot. Okay, it's great. Usually people don't even notice that in the piano, and you don't hear it. But it's there, and it's good to bring it out, because it's very disorienting. All right, now, right after that, there's a chord progression, which is fabulous, and it relates to this business of dipping under, because of the whole place it goes, the key that it moves to. We are in the key of A minor, and normally, in classical music, of which, of course, I'm talking about Schubert and earlier, and Beethoven, and the composers that Brahms is looking back toward. You know, Brahms edited the works of Schubert. He was a musicologist, Brahms, and a historian, and an editor. He spent a lot of time doing things like that. You would not find the key relationship that we're about to find, so I will say something about that. We just heard this. We're at this point in E minor, but it goes. We end up in F sharp minor. What he's doing here, it's very simple, because what Brahms likes to do is use a simple, logical, explicable, historically viable, unassailable technique. The only word he used, only in German, was unassailable, which I'm not sure what the word is in German, but anyway, I know they use it a lot over there. Anyway, a technique that cannot be questioned, and it's theoretically sound, that matter to him. At the same time, it's quite personal, which is you're in E minor, he goes to a chord in that key, but uses it as the dominant of this key, which you don't expect at all. So we've gone to F minor, he does the same thing. It's sixth chord and turns that into a dominant of F sharp minor, and then you think he's going to do it again, and he would go here, but he doesn't do it this time. He goes someplace you don't expect, F sharp minor. All right, we're glad to be in F sharp minor after that. It's very tense. But F sharp minor, what does that have to do with A minor? It has a very important thing to do with A minor for Brahms, which is normally, if you're in A minor, the relative major is C major. Okay, so that would be, you can stay there, that would be A minor up to C major. But Brahms doesn't go up when he can go down. So he goes down exactly the same opposite direction to F sharp minor. So instead of a minor third up, he creates a relationship between A minor and a minor third down. F sharp minor. Now, F sharp minor happens to be the relative minor to A major, and you're in A minor. So there's another relationship that's called parallel. So, I mean, you've got A major and A minor. So he's really happy about this, because it also makes C sharp very important, because in A minor, there's no C sharp. But remember, he went, and then, you know, da da dee da dee, C sharp. That C sharp for him is important, and it exists in F sharp minor, and it exists in A major. So that C sharp that you get a glimpse of at the very beginning becomes more meaningful because of this key, which matters, because for a composer like Brahms, who's thinking about this technical, unassailable quality that he learned from Beethoven, if you give a hint of a note or a key, if you're moving in the downward direction and you're moving towards sharps, you should fulfill it. So here's the fulfillment of that. He had sometimes had someone else to do the fulfillments, but most of the time he did it himself. It's a bad business joke. Okay, all right. Now, we have to keep moving forward. By the way, that scale that you played right at that last thing at bar 96, would you play that in the piano? Yes. Now that scale is actually from F sharp minor, but because of where it starts and where it ends, it sounds like Phrygian, which is a very old mode, Brahms does everything on purpose. I actually think this one person, you could say that's absolutely true about Brahms. He said everything the way he meant to say it, and he wrote what he meant to write, and he played as loud as he meant to, and everything. So the feeling of taking a mode and having it appear like that, the Phrygian mode is important because it's old. And he was another innovation of Brahms was to look very far backward. Now, how is that an innovation? The first composer in the classical Western tradition to look backwards in a new way was Beethoven. In his late string quartets, Beethoven looked backwards to Renaissance forms. You find this in certain late quartets where you have dance forms that haven't been around since the Renaissance, and there they are. And fugue comes back in a way that refers to the Renaissance, pre-Bach even. So there was a sense of novelty there, especially Beethoven 132. There's a real sense of novelty by looking backward and reinvigorating something that had disappeared. Brahms also did this a lot. In his choral music, he refers to Renaissance textures. The way he writes canons, like the one that you heard there, that kind of canon, very displaced, but it refers back to an obsession with canons, which is also very old. And he liked the old modes. So using the Phrygian feeling is very important. In fact, the very end, let's take a look at the very end here of this movement. Could we just play the very end from the the Poco Meno Allegro, maybe with the pickup into in the piano to the end? That ending has to be Brahms, not only because it is, so it's a safe thing to say, but also because it is from underneath, and it is a chord progression that is very ancient and was not used as a cadence chord progression in the classical period and much in the Romantic period. What it is, again, it's just like the beginning. Instead of doing this, you don't hear that, in this ending. Even with the A major, you don't hear that. What you're hearing is coming from below. This is really ancient stuff. It comes from it actually refers back to the beginning. Da-da-dee-da-dum, when he was doing the subdominant. This is a subdominant tonic cadence. It's called a plagal cadence, but it's a very elaborate kind of plagal. Plagal simply means coming from below, and it's just, you thought you were going to sit down, didn't you? It comes from a lot of hymn writing. Here's a very simple plagal cadence. So instead of going, it goes. If you make the chord, the subdominant chord minor, it's both older and more 19th century, because Brahms, a little bit Chopin, but mostly Brahms goes back to that and brings it back into the vocabulary. So the ending is very much like that. But not only that, it's hard to tell listening. It occurred to me, I'm looking at the score. Could you just play the opening of what you just played, and then I'll say something about the rhythm. The same thing you just played from the pickup into the polka. Now I'm saying pickup, and I'm ruining it. But go ahead. Okay, now, what you're hearing is completely different than what's written. Let's do it again. 4, 1, 2, 3. 4, 1, 2, 3. 4, 1. You see, it sounds like, now play it again, it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's not. Okay, now, so how do you know that it's not? Well, could you back up a little bit? Because it's actually quite extraordinary what he does here. Let's go from the pickup 199, 200, the piano into 201, where it says espressivo for everybody. This is going to be 4. I'll conduct this. You don't have to watch me, though, because it's like normal conducting. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. It's slowing down, of course. 4, 1, 2. When does this ever get straightened out? It does, with these arpeggios. But if you listen to, you might even think you're in 5. Could you just play the piano part from the low D, the scale? No, I'm sorry. This from here.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Now I say 5 because that's what it sounds like, but it's actually 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this keeps happening. But he adjusts the size of the phrases until they fit into 4 finally, and the very, very end even has the cello arrives a 16th note before the last chord, which is actually kind of interesting. In other words, it's gone from being way off to closer and closer, kind of stretto, which means narrowing closer to the rhythm, to the meter, and then it arrives, but the cello is still a little early. He could have, didn't have to do that, but it's great. Could you play just the cello and the piano, the last 1, 2, 3, 4 bars? There's no reason that the cello couldn't have arrived with the piano. Except, of course, you don't have a low A, but he could have worked that out. All right. Now, let me make sure that I've said what I want to say so far, because we need to perform this in just a moment. Oh, you know, about the clarinet. I think we should try something. Mühlfeld himself, the inspiration for Brahms to write the 2 sonatas, the clarinet quintet, and this trio, was, when he first joined the Meiningen Orchestra, was a violinist in the orchestra. It's a very strange story. He was a violinist and switched to the clarinet. That doesn't happen that often that I know of. And then Brahms heard him play the Weber clarinet quintet and decided between the two of them, they negotiated that Brahms would write him some music, and he wrote him quite a lot of music. There have been some interviews with Mühlfeld, with members of the orchestra, and they're notated down, and there's a description of Mühlfeld's playing. And one of the most famous descriptions says that he played with a big vibrato. Now, this is interesting, because vibrato is one of the most discussed, and you see musicians really have a lot of difficult things to talk about. It's one of the most talked about things in the music world, vibrato. Wouldn't you say? Yeah, it's pretty close. So if you hear people talking about vibrato, let's say on the train, they're probably musicians. And you know, and there's that bar where the astrophysicists are on one side and the vibrato discussions on the other side. Okay, but anyway, how much vibrato do you use? Are you playing Baroque music? Are you playing classical? How much vibrato did they use before recordings came out? Joachim, who was the violinist who premiered the Brahms' violin concerto and the sonatas and played them with Brahms and was his close friend, and they knew each other from when Brahms was very young, and so was Joachim. They also traded counterpoint exercises back and forth, teaching each other. Joachim was also a composer, and very, very close relationship. We know from descriptions that Joachim hardly used vibrato except in expressive moments, much less than people do today. But according to the letters, Mildfeld used as much vibrato as any string player of that time. But we don't really know exactly what that means. So I'm going to ask Romie to play a phrase or two, let's say your opening phrase, with no vibrato, which is the way a lot of clarinetists are told they must play, with a little vibrato, however you would like to play it, and also with more vibrato. And let's see, but always be committed to what you're doing. Don't make fun of it. The C sharp had a tiny bit of vibrato. All right, okay. That's okay. It's okay. Now, let's hear it with, normally you do use a little bit, right? Yeah. Let's do it the way you would play it, which is mysterious. Let's hear it. Now that's subtle vibrato. Yeah, it's very subtle though. Now how about doing it so it's not so subtle, but and any way you want. Yeah, let's do it a little bit more. See, now this is interesting. People are applauding because, and I read it, there's an entire website about this, which I read. People like vibrato. It's a weird phenomenon. So let's hear it with more vibrato just to see what happens. And the discussion of clarinets and vibrato is something you can spend a lot of time with if you care to. But here, let's.
So the fear is that if we use too much vibrato, we'll sound like a saxophone.
Now that is a fear. I'm terrified. Okay, go ahead. It just sounds more like Artie Shaw. One more thing before we hear the piece, because I think this is an important part of playing. You know, as you were saying earlier, there are certain traditions. Ironically, one of them is German clarinet playing, where they don't want you to use any vibrato, right? But Mildfeld was German, and it seems like the argument started about this kind of performing argument about clarinets and vibrato started in the early 20th century. And how it got so enormous, I just don't know. But let's hear the cello opening with no vibrato, but played with commitment, which is nobody plays it like that. But let's hear it. Interesting. Now it sort of sounds Baroque like that, because those are what Baroque players sometimes do. Can you play it the same way, but as if you really felt that it should not have vibrato, and this is the way it should go? Nice. Now can you play it with the minimum amount of vibrato that you think is necessary for expression? Oh, okay, interesting. Now play it the way you would play it if nobody told you what to do. You forgot, yeah, right? Now, on the piano, how's your vibrato? There are people who do that, when they play, but you can't hear it. Okay, so it's just vibrato envy is a very serious problem. All right, so now we're ready to hear the first movement, with or without vibrato, with all kinds of, remember that some of the things we talked about are rhythmic displacement. the separation of the planes, almost in a cubist fashion. The more if you at least focus on that when you're listening, don't just get wrapped up on the beautiful tones they're making, because that's nice. But we want to focus on certain things. One is the rhythmic ambiguity, or ambivalence, depending how you look at it. Where is the beat? And another aspect of it is this strange feeling, which is accurate, that the harmonies are coming from underneath most of the time rather than above. One more point. No, that's okay. That last chord that we ended on, now that we know we've ended on A major, I just want to remind you that the very, very beginning, when we were in A minor, when we finally heard, that's where we end. But that also was in the wrong key at the time. Okay, good. All right, see you next week. Right, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.